Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denisha Price, and I'm one of the chapter activities coordinators with American Concrete Institute. I would like to welcome you to today's leadership webinar series on student activities. Our speaker today is Connette Worlds. She is currently the Student, Faculty, and Young Professional Activities Coordinator for ACI. She has been with ACI for 6 years. Her position in the membership department is focused on recruiting, engaging, and retaining young members and educators. She works closely with the Chapter Activities Department in supporting and promoting activities organized by ACI's 240 plus student chapters. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Connette Worlds, and now she will begin today's presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from today. Welcome to the ACI Student Activities webinar. Today, we will provide you with recommendations on how your local chapter can provide better support and engagement with the university students in your area. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping notes. This presentation will be recorded and added to the chapter library located on the ACI chapter homepage. During the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A box to ask questions. I will respond to as many questions as I can at the end of the webinar. As Denisha said, I have been employed with ACI for 6 years, previously working in the Marketing and Chapter Activities Department before transitioning into my current role as Student, Faculty, and Young Professional Activities Coordinator in the Membership Department. I am the liaison for the ACI committee known as SIPAC, which reports to the ACI Board of Direction and oversees 5 subcommittees, including the student competitions, teaching methods and educational material, the faculty network, the Student Leadership Council, and the Young Professional Activities Committee. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about ACI's relationship with university students. We currently have over 15,000 student members, and that includes undergraduate and graduate students. Membership in ACI is 100% free to students, and they receive significant discounts on many of our products and services. In addition, registration to the upcoming ACI virtual convention in March of this year is 100% free to students. During a typical in-person convention, student members would only pay $20 to attend the convention. Most students are introduced to ACI through a professor who is teaching a concrete materials or reinforced concrete class that requires them to purchase titles such as 318.19. Graduate students maintain ACI membership in order to take advantage of research materials available in the ACI collection or opportunities to publish papers in the Materials or Structural Journal or CI magazine. They also look for opportunities to present those papers during sessions at the convention or by connecting to experts that are members of our technical committees. ACI student competitions are also a major attraction for undergraduate students. In the normal academic year, ACI welcomes approximately 600 students to the convention to participate in one of 7 team-based competitions. Students from universities in the US, Canada, Latin America, the Middle East, North Africa, Asia, and Europe are able to apply classroom theory to real concrete projects through these events. Our most popular competition by far is the fiber reinforced concrete bowling ball competition, in which the teams actually bowl their concrete ball. For spring 2021, we will be hosting the second iteration of the virtual concrete solutions competition, which encourages students to present their ideas on how concrete can positively impact the world through a video-based presentation. We also offer 2 individual research paper-focused competitions in the spring and the fall. ACI currently has approximately 250 student chapters worldwide. About half of those student chapters are located in Latin America, but we also have a growing number of student chapters in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, as you can see represented by the green dots on the screen. Much like the local chapters, the ACI student chapters are a place for undergraduate and graduate students alike to host technical presentations, meetings, and social events with their peers who also have an interest in concrete. These student chapters are sponsored by local ACI chapters, but there are a few that are mainly supported by their university because there is no chapter in their area. For the purpose of this webinar, we will dive in depth on what it means to sponsor a student chapter and/or student activities. For those chapters who are not currently sponsoring a student chapter, in order to form a student chapter, the person submitting the application, which is usually a faculty advisor or student president, must go through a similar process to forming a local professional chapter. The Chapter Activities Department requires a petition with the names of 15 student members, a draft of proposed bylaws, and the support of a faculty advisor. The local chapter is also required to submit a letter of support. These documents will be submitted to John Kahn, Director of Chapter Activities. Once the student chapter is approved, they will begin receiving communication about ACI student programs and activities from me. Now I'm going to start us off by giving you the basics on how to support student activities. A few important questions you should be asking during your board meetings are, number one, who at your chapter is responsible for student outreach? Depending on the size of your chapter, this may be a single person or a committee of people. Their role in your chapter is to keep students informed about how they can engage with your local chapter, ACI, and identifying the needs of the students on campus. Does your chapter offer free or discounted membership for students? Adding the students to your database is one of the best ways to maintain communication with them before and after they graduate. Students are potential chapter members and will need guidance and mentorship from local professionals about how to navigate the concrete industry. This is a screenshot from the webpage for the ACI Central Ohio chapter. On their membership page, they make it very clear that student membership is free. If your chapter has a web page, it should clearly state whether there is a discounted or complimentary membership for students. These students are not only the future members of your chapter, but also future chapter officers and future board members. It is also important to note that the Central Ohio chapter has a professor on the board of direction. Lisa Burris is a board member and the faculty advisor for the ACI student chapter at The Ohio State University. Ideally, you will have one or more educators on your board to maintain the connection between the industry and academia. Number two, what type of financial support can your chapter offer? Chapters that run ACI certification programs are generally able to offer some form of financial support to the student chapters to fund student activities and programs. If your chapter does not have revenue from certification programs, you may want to consider hosting an annual fundraiser. This is a screenshot from the webpage for the ACI Arizona chapter. Despite coronavirus restrictions, last year the chapter was able to reschedule and implement safety protocols so that they could still host their annual golf tournament. The proceeds from the golf tournament help support student activities for the ACI student chapter at Arizona State University. This student chapter is active on their campus, regularly participates in ACI competitions, and annually receives recognition as an excellent university in the ACI Award for University Student Activities. Once again, you will find a professor named James Ernzen listed as a member of the board of directors. If your chapter is unable to coordinate a major fundraising event like this one, then consider asking the members of your chapter for donations or seek sponsorship from local company members to support student activities. Number 3, what type of programs do you offer? There are 3 main types of programs offered by ACI chapters. Do not feel pressure to run all of these programs. Instead, select one or more that you can focus on and do really well based on your human and financial resources. Here is a screenshot from the ACI Southern California chapter webpage. This local chapter does not sponsor any ACI student chapters. However, they have found other ways to support student activities. They provide an annual $2,500 scholarship to 3 local university students pursuing civil structural engineering degrees, construction management, or architecture degrees. In addition to providing scholarships, they sponsor teams in the ASCE regional and national concrete canoe competitions. If there is not a student chapter in your area, these are great alternatives to engaging with the local academic community. I would also like to mention that the chapter membership is free to students in Southern California, and they offer a discounted rate for young professionals. If your chapter does not currently have a scholarship program, then feel free to share a link on your chapter webpage to the ACI Fellowship and Scholarship Program. The ACI Foundation offers fellowships up to $10,000 and scholarships up to $5,000 to civil and construction management students. These applications are received every fall on November 1st. You can find more information on www.acifoundation.org. There is also a section on the webpage to list all the scholarships offered by ACI chapters. Contact the Chapter Activities Department if your scholarship is not featured on this page or if the information needs to be updated. Another option for some local chapters is to host a regional or local student competition. Every year, Eastern Pennsylvania and Delaware chapter hosts a student bean competition with participants from several universities in the surrounding US states. Cash prizes for the competition is $1,500 US. Last year and this year, university teams were able to participate by shipping their beans to the Wheatner University lab, where the testing was live streamed on Facebook due to COVID restrictions. This chapter also has a $5,000 annual scholarship program. I would once again like to point out that this chapter has a student liaison from the industry and a board director from a local university. More importantly, they have an entire page on their website dedicated to student activities. Another alternative to concrete project competitions is to host a concrete quiz or poster competition. The Islamic University of Technology student chapter in Bangladesh does not have a local sponsoring chapter because ACI does not have a chapter in that area. However, they have an active student chapter which recently hosted a concrete quiz competition and a poster competition. Quiz competitions related to concrete research and/or quizzes about local concrete projects and buildings are a great way to have fun and create engaging events with the university students. Hosting a quiz event should generally be low cost with the exception of providing some form of cash prize or award. Items such as merchandise from the ACI store or Amazon or debit gift cards are easy to access digitally. We've already talked about scholarship programs and local competitions, so that brings us to ACI certification training. If your chapter is serious about helping to train the next generation of concrete leaders and your chapter is offering certification training, you should really consider discounting or subsidizing certification programs for students. The screenshot in the upper right-hand corner of the slide is from the ACI Guatemala chapter Facebook page which is currently promoting certification training to both professionals and a special discount for students. This chapter currently sponsors 20 ACI student chapters throughout the country. Many of our domestic and international student chapters recognize the value of certification training. Some chapters, such as the ACI Pittsburgh area, ACI Houston, and ACI Carolinas chapter, offer certification training on site at the university. With COVID restrictions, this is not a viable option for many chapters right now, but it is definitely an option to consider in the very near future. In addition to certification training, last year, ACI Guatemala was instrumental in planning a virtual regional student competition and academic conference for students at universities throughout Mexico and Central and South America, as you can see from the promotional ads on the left and bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If your chapter has limited or no financial resources, there are still many ways that you can physically or virtually support student activities via chapter meetings, networking events, or by providing technical speakers for student, chapter, or university events. The Northern California and Western Nevada chapter, for example, hosts an annual meeting dedicated to students at California State University, Chico, and San Jose State University. This chapter has a student activities committee with members from a local university and the industry. Next month, they will host a free virtual lunchtime event with a guest speaker who will discuss the industry, economic, and job outlook. The student chapter from CSU Chico will also be given an opportunity to provide a yearly review of their student activities. This event would normally take place in person as a free dinner event for students. If your chapter is currently offering virtual events to your professional members, then hosting a lunch and learn for local students will only cost your chapter time and a dedicated staff member or committee who will and can organize a 1-hour virtual event for students. The ACI Philippines chapter is the poster child for everything a local chapter could and should be doing to support local student chapters. They currently sponsor 14 student chapters in the Philippines and have basically checked off all the basics. Number one, they have a professor as a past president and current board director. Number two, they host virtual convention and regional competition every year. Number three, they provide technical speakers for events hosted by the local student chapters. In the midst of COVID-19, asking your chapter officers and/or members to offer up their expertise and speak to students about local concrete projects or share what it's like to work for their company or in their specific job function is priceless for young people who are on the verge of figuring out how they can contribute to the concrete industry. It will only cost someone time to do this, but it is something that your chapter can focus on at least one time per year. Let's recap all the ways your chapter can support student activities. Please do not feel obligated to do everything on this list. Pick one or two things that you can start doing in 2021, or one or two things that you are already doing but would like to do better and grow from there. Number one, you should identify a student outreach liaison or committee. You should also be offering some form of membership to students. In addition, appoint at least one professor as a board member so you can maintain the connection between academia and industry. Number two, decide whether or not you can offer financial support through certification revenue, annual fundraisers, donations, or by seeking company sponsorship. Number three, decide what type of programs you will offer, be it scholarships, local or regional competitions, or certification training for students. Number four, identify ways to offer physical or virtual support to students. either by inviting them to attend your chapter meetings or hosting special meetings dedicated just for students, or also by sending your chapter officers, board members, or chapter members as technical speakers at their university for their student chapter events. Thank you for your time and attention. My contact information is featured on the slide. And if for any reason you would like to have a one-on-one meeting with me, please feel free to reach out. I would be more than happy to help your local chapter figure out a program that works for you. And I will now address any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kenneth, for that great presentation. At this time, we don't have any questions, but as Kenneth said, I would encourage you to use the question box if you have any questions. And I'll just give everyone a few seconds just in case some questions do come in. Kenneth, I do want to let everyone know that our next webinar is scheduled on Wednesday, February the 17th at 3 p.m. Eastern, on enhancing your virtual chapter meetings. We have two great speakers that will lead that discussion, and that's Katie Emilio and Michael Morrison with ACI. And it looks like we do have some questions that have come in. Is the student membership free at both the ACI international and local chapter level?
ACI membership is free to students. The local chapters, I know that most local chapters that I'm aware of, the membership is free through their local chapter, or within the United States, I've seen a minimum charge of $5 per year to be a member of the local chapter.
Okay, thank you. And also we had a question about the presentation. We will have a recording of this presentation. We will have it on our ACI's website in the chapter section of the website. And if you also want us to email you a copy, I'll be more than happy to do that. And it looks like we don't have any more questions that have come in, Kenneth. I just want to thank you again for that great presentation. And this will conclude today's presentation. Oh, it looks like one has come in. Wait a minute. What if a student's university does not have a student chapter? What if a student university does not have a chapter?
If there is no ACI student chapter at the university, they can certainly form one. They only need 15 students to have ACI student membership, which again is free. And then they also need a faculty advisor. And that the process for doing that is pretty simple. It was on one of the previous slides that I showed. But if you go to www.concrete.org/students, you'll find the information on how to form a student chapter. What I also emphasize is that in order to engage with students, they don't need to have a student chapter, because there are chapters like the Southern California chapter that does not sponsor a student chapter, but they do other types of support for students. They have scholarship programs. They also sponsor students in ASCE's Concrete Canoe competition, which is kind of like a sister organization to ACI. So there's other ways that you all could find. There's a lot of competition teams that participate in our competitions every year, and they do not have a student chapter. At least half of the teams don't actually have a student chapter, but they are interested in participating in our competitions. We do not require a student chapter in order to do that.
Okay, and the next question, is there an easy resource that outlines the scheduled deadlines for the student competitions?
Yes, actually, if you just go to our website, www.concrete.org/students/student competitions, we always have our list of upcoming competitions on that homepage. We usually only plan those out two conventions in advance, and especially right now with COVID, we're doing everything virtual. So as I mentioned, now we have the Concrete Solutions competition coming up for the March convention. The registration for that is The deadline is February 21st. It is a completely virtual competition, so definitely encourage the students in your area to participate in that. They'd only need to put together a video presentation, and that could be through PowerPoint or through actually filming with the iPhone or Android camera. And then a competition that we have for the fall right now, we're planning for the Eco Concrete competition, which we're planning for that to be either virtual or in person, depending on what happens here in the States.
Okay, and it looks like, I believe that's our last question. Let's see if any more come in before I conclude the webinar. And we also had a comment, great job, Kenneth.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna point out this picture that I had on the very last slide. I lost my PowerPoint at a certain point. This picture at the very end, this is actually me pictured in the center with the black jacket on, standing with the competition team for University of Houston downtown. I do want to mention that their professor that's on the right-hand side of the screen on the suit, he's a board member at the ACI Houston chapter. So again, that connection of having at least one academic person on your board is very important, so you can know what's going on in the university level. This student chapter, they're heavily involved in certification training through their local chapter. And the young lady that's pictured to my left with the long brown hair, I believe this photo was taken in 2016 or 2017. When she graduated from school, she was invited to be on the board of direction for the ACI Houston chapter, and she eventually became president of that chapter within 2 or 3 years of graduating from college. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out with your chapters being very intentional of identifying student leaders who can give back to your local chapter. She's now the liaison. I mentioned having a student outreach person or committee. She's now the liaison for the ACI student chapter at Houston downtown. And she was recently appointed to the committee where I'm the liaison, SIPAC. And so that's ideally what we want to see from your students, as much as they're involved on the local level through their university, that they'll eventually integrate into your local chapter, as well as integrate into ACI International through engagement and leadership opportunities.
Okay. And we had another question to come in. Does ACI International have any videos that professors can use to introduce the idea of forming a student chapter to their students?
Yes, on the ACI page, again, if you go to concrete.org/students and you find the information on the introduction to student chapters, there is a student chapter handbook. I think we call it a toolkit. And you can get the direct links to videos about student chapter membership, student membership, specifically about upcoming competitions. As well as if you go to YouTube and you go to ACI's home YouTube page, there is a playlist specifically for students, and there's probably about 8 videos or so with information about our competitions and our general student membership. As well as next month, I will be doing a webinar on young professional activities. And so we also have a young professional playlist on our YouTube channel. So you can look for that as well.
And we just have a few comments. Thank you, Kenneth, for a very informative presentation. That was from Christian from the ACI Philippines chapter.
Thank you. And again, my contact information is there. So if you all want to have a one-on-one meeting just to tell me what exactly is going on at your local chapter and what you would like to do, I'm more than happy to give you more specific guidance on how to engage with students.
And that is all we have in the question box. I just want to say thank you again, Kenneth. We really appreciate this presentation that you gave us today. And this will conclude today's presentation. We hope that everyone enjoyed it and learned some valuable information that you can apply to your chapter. We hope that you all have a great day, great evening, or great night, depending on where you're at, and continue to stay safe.